December 27, 1942, Port Moresby, New Guinea. The sun lifted over the Owen Stanleys, throwing pale gold across the steel matting at Lockheed Airfield as crews pulled camouflage nets off a row of unusual silhouettes. 12 Lockheed P-38 Lightnings of the 39th Fighter Squadron sat ready, clean canopies, full fuel tanks, ammunition belts loaded, and their twin booms glinting in the humid morning air. A Coast Watcher message had arrived only minutes earlier, multiple Japanese formations assembling over Buna with fighter escort, roughly 40 aircraft inbound. Intercept time, half an hour. Captain Thomas Lynch made final checks before signaling his flight to warm engines. Among the pilots sliding into cockpits was Second Lieutenant Richard Bong, temporarily attached while his own squadron awaited deliveries of P-38s. None of the men at Lockheed realized they were about to initiate a shift in Pacific air combat as profound as Midway had been at sea. To this point in the war, Japanese aviators of the elite naval air groups had dominated the skies. Their Mitsubishi A6M0, turn radius under 1,000 feet, climbed to 6,000 feet in just over 7 minutes, and tight maneuverability unmatched at low speeds, was the terror of every Allied pilot. American P-39s and P-40s had learned at high cost that attempting to turn with a Zero was a death sentence. The Zero's combination of feather-light construction and superb agility had defined the tactical landscape since Pearl Harbor. But the P-38 Lightning was not designed to fight on the Zero's terms. Built around twin Allison V1710 engines delivering 1,150 horsepower each and equipped with turbo-superchargers that preserved power at extreme altitudes, the Lightning could reach 414 miles per hour and climb above 40,000 feet, an altitude where few Japanese fighters could operate. Its nose housed a devastating battery, a 20mm cannon and 4.50 caliber machine guns, all firing dead straight without convergence issues. Richard Bong understood the significance of this design from his training at Hamilton Field. Everything about the P-38's tactics contradicted the instinctive dogfighting methods pilots had grown up with. The Lightning demanded a new mindset: fight vertically, not horizontally. Attack from above, dive through, climb back to height. No turning contests. No circling duels. Speed and altitude were the weapons. Far out over the Huon Gulf, Japanese formations moved toward Buna with their usual confidence. A mix of A6M0s, Nagamaki 43 Oscars, and Val dive bombers flew in disciplined patterns honed by 13 months of near-unbroken success. Most had seen glimpses of the twin-tailed American fighter in recent weeks but assumed it was a reconnaissance platform or bomber escort, nothing that threatened Zero superiority. They would discover the truth within minutes. At 18,000 feet, Lynch rolled his P-38 into a shallow dive, the aircraft instantly leaping toward 400 miles per hour. Bong and the others followed, selecting targets while maintaining strict formation discipline. At 400-plus yards, a distance from which P-40s struggled to hit anything, the concentrated firepower of the Lightning tore through Japanese aircraft. Lynch's first burst obliterated an Oscar in one pass. Japanese fighters tried to follow the diving Lightnings but quickly met their structural limits. Zero pilots felt their controls stiffen and their airframes shudder violently as they neared speeds their planes were never designed to handle. Warning horns screamed. They had no choice but to break off. Bong spotted a Zero angling toward Lynch and executed a smooth deflection shot. His first burst found the mark, sending the fighter spiraling downward in flames. Moments later, multiple Zeros attempted to cut him off from above. Bong simply shoved both throttles forward and dove away, building speed until the Zeros vanished behind him. When he leveled out just above the jungle canopy, he found himself behind a Val bomber. A short burst set it ablaze. 2 victories, his first of the war. The entire engagement lasted under 10 minutes. The 39th Squadron claimed 12 Japanese aircraft destroyed. No P-38s were lost. Japanese after-action reports, for the first time in the conflict, contained not dismissive assessments but alarm. Pilots described enemy fighters of impossible speed, striking from altitudes the Japanese could not reach and disengaging at will. This was not a new opponent, it was a new kind of air combat. The P-38's arrival forced Japan to reassess assumptions that had underpinned its air doctrine since the Sino-Japanese War. Vertical maneuvering, using altitude and speed rather than turning, rendered the Zero's advantages meaningless. Attempts to climb after a Lightning simply left Japanese fighters stalling at altitude. Diving after one risked structural collapse. Even when a Zero positioned itself behind a P-38, the American fighter's superior speed allowed disengagement at will. On January 7, 1943, 9 P-38s escorting bombers over La confirmed the new reality. Despite being outnumbered, they climbed above 25,000 feet and initiated controlled diving attacks. Bong again demonstrated his precision, destroying an Oscar with a well-judged deflection shot before executing a sweeping chandelle that carried him safely back to altitude. Japanese pilots never reached a firing solution. The Pacific air battlefield had become three-dimensional. For Japanese pilots trained exclusively in tight maneuvering at low altitude, the change was catastrophic. Throughout early 1943, the P-38's presence expanded as new squadrons transitioned to the Lightning. Training programs centered on one philosophy: altitude equals survival. Young pilots learned to resist every natural instinct and avoid turning fights entirely. Maneuvers like the high-speed yo-yo and barrel roll attack capitalized on the Lightning's strengths while preserving energy for the climb back to altitude. Japan attempted to respond with new aircraft, the Ki-61 Tony, Ki-44 Shoki, and later the superb Ki-84 Frank, but none appeared in sufficient numbers, nor could they match the Lightning above 25,000 feet. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea in March 1943 further exposed Japan's declining air power. P-38's flying top cover prevented Zero escorts from protecting their transport convoy. 8 transports and 4 destroyers were sunk. Japanese reinforcement capability in New Guinea never recovered. The roster of American Lightning aces grew rapidly. Thomas Lynch refined vertical tactics to a near-scientific art form. Richard Bong displayed extraordinary gunnery skill, earning victory after victory with remarkably few rounds expended. Then came Thomas McGuire of the 431st Squadron, whose technical, systematic approach to combat produced 38 victories. His tactical manual became required reading throughout 5th Air Force units. By mid-1943, the Lightning's operational reach became fully apparent. Its range exceeded 1,000 miles with drop tanks, making it the only Allied fighter capable of escorting bombers into deep Japanese territory. This capability made possible one of the war's most famous missions. On April 18, 1943, P-38s executed the long-range intercept that killed Admiral Yamamoto. Only the Lightning had the combination of range, navigational stability, and speed required to fly 435 miles over water at wavetop height, arrive at the target to the minute, and escape without losses. The mission struck a psychological blow far greater than the loss of a single commander. It proved that American air power could reach anyone, anywhere. Japan's reaction bordered on desperation. Orders instructed pilots to avoid combat against P-38s unless overwhelmingly superior in both altitude and numbers, conditions that almost never occurred. Attempts at ambushes at low altitude rarely succeeded. Even the introduction of improved fighters could not reverse the trend due to shrinking pilot experience and limited fuel. By late 1943, Japan's daylight operations across the Solomons and New Guinea ceased almost entirely. Movement of ships and supplies shifted to night operations. Airfields became targets rather than bases of power. Attrition statistics revealed the irreversible nature of the collapse. Entire Japanese air groups lost over 70% of their pilots in 6 months. Replacement pilots averaged fewer than 100 flight hours. Most had never flown above 20,000 feet. American P-38 losses remained manageable, and pilots who ditched at sea were often rescued and returned to duty. By late 1944, improved P-38J and L models, better turbo-superchargers, boosted ailerons, cleaner intercoolers, erased the Zero's last maneuvering advantages. When Lightning units entered the Philippines, they swept the skies clear within days. The Lightning's influence extended beyond combat victories. Reconnaissance variants mapped every Japanese installation across the Southwest Pacific. High-altitude photographs enabled precise strikes, eliminated supply depots, and guided amphibious operations. P-38 escorts enabled deep penetration B-24 raids that crippled Japanese infrastructure. By 1945, Japanese air power in the Southwest Pacific had effectively collapsed. Combat-ready pilots were nearly gone, and aircraft that reached the battlefield were no match for experienced P-38 units. The kill ratio soared beyond 7-to-1. Lightning pilots dominated the air wherever they appeared. Richard Bong reached 40 victories, the highest-scoring American ace. McGuire reached 38 before his death in early 1945. Together with scores of other Lightning pilots, they demonstrated what disciplined vertical tactics, technological superiority, and robust training could achieve. The legacy extended long after the war. The P-38's emphasis on energy maneuvering, high-altitude performance, and concentrated forward firepower influenced nearly every fighter developed afterward. Jet combat tactics, energy management, boom and zoom attacks, altitude dominance, all trace their roots to lessons learned over New Guinea and the Solomons. Japanese survivors later described the P-38 with reluctant respect, an enemy aircraft that redefined the rules of engagement and erased their early war advantages. American veterans remembered the Lightning as the fighter that gave them the initiative, confidence, and reach to win the Pacific Air War. The twin-boom fighter that Japanese pilots first dismissed in late 1942 had, by war's end, reshaped aerial warfare. It didn't just defeat Japanese air power, it transformed the very nature of air combat itself.